While tidying up the house, I stumbled upon something odd. The newly bought pack of sanitary pads had already been opened. Without a second thought, I called the law firm and had them draft a divorce agreement. I sent it straight to Chase. His call came almost instantly. Again? What now? I bit my lip. There's one pad missing from the drawer. His voice snapped back, sharp and annoyed. Do whatever you want. Just don't come crawling back, begging me later. The line went dead. He had hung up, rude and dismissive as always. Regret? Not a chance. The only thing I regretted was being blind back then. And even worse, watching the once capable, decisive woman I used to be with her under years of silent suffering. Just as I was packing my luggage, Addison Rodrigo burst into the room in tears. She was Chase Hudson's current assistant, and the so-called first love from his past. Mirabel. I'm sorry. That day I went to your house to drop off some documents for Chase, and my period came unexpectedly, so I borrowed one of your pads. I didn't think it would cause such a misunderstanding. Please don't divorce him. If you do, I'll never be able to clear my name, even if I threw myself into the Solvane River. Her half-hearted apology made me smirk coldly. If I don't divorce him, how else would I make space for you? Addison's voice caught in her throat. Mirabel, how could you say that? I never meant to come between you and Chase. I didn't. I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp. Is it that you didn't want to or simply couldn't? Back then, when Hudson's family searched for a wife among the capital's socialites, Addison, an illegitimate daughter, was the first name crossed off the list. 7 years later, the Rodrigo family had long since gone bankrupt. When Addison returned to the country, the only role she could cling to was that of his assistant. Tears streamed down her face, more pitiful than ever. If you don't trust me, then I'll resign, okay? I didn't even look at her. Up to you, I replied coldly, using the exact words Chase had just thrown at me. I lowered my head, no longer giving her my attention. In the 2 years since Addison joined the company, I had brought up divorce to Chase more times than I could count. And every single time, she cried and said she would resign. Now that Chase and I were truly ending things, she was still playing the same tired game, retreating to win sympathy. Chase was sick of my so-called jealousy, yet he still believed every one of her fake tears. Mirabel, I'm begging you, don't leave. Don't divorce him, she sobbed, her hands gripping my arm tightly, shaking it like some tragic heroine torn straight from a melodrama. Hit me. Just don't be mad anymore. With tears glistening in her eyes, she grabbed my hand and pulled it toward her own cheek. I watched her clumsy act unfold, lips tightening as I silently counted down in my mind. 19. I hadn't even reached 7 when Chase came rushing in, panic written all over his face. Stop. He barked at me, furious. Mirabel, you've gone too far. Addison was once our classmate. How could you even think of hitting her? Right on cue, as always, Chase arrived just in time to play the knight in shining armor. And just like always, he pinned the blame on me without asking a single question. I let out a bitter laugh. Someone had really perfected her damsel in distress routine. Setting down my suitcase, I slowly rose to my feet and looked Chase straight in the eye. If your vision's that bad, I suggest you see an ophthalmologist. Hit her? Please. I wouldn't dare dirty my hands. You. He was stunned, the words catching in his throat. Then I turned my gaze to Addison. If I'm not mistaken, I didn't hear a knock and I certainly didn't open the door. My eyes narrowed, locking onto hers. So tell me, how exactly did you get in? Her face paled. She staggered back, nearly losing her balance, until a familiar arm reached out and caught her by the waist. Chase, full of concern, steadied her and explained coldly. Addison is my assistant now. I gave her the door lock code for convenience at work. What? You're making a fuss over something this small? His eyes were filled with disdain. Mirabel, your jealousy is truly suffocating. His words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I stood frozen. He said I was suffocating him? Hadn't it been me suffocating under the weight of Addison's constant intrusion for the past 2 years, under his silent consent and indulgence? She had invaded every corner of our lives without restraint. From dropping off documents to eating and spending nights at our home, she had done things like wearing my clothes without permission, and even using my sanitary pads. All of it, these so-called small things, had added up, until our 2-person marriage was twisted into a 3-person farce. And I was the extra. I tilted my head back, forcing back the tears, and looked up at Chase. Since this marriage brings nothing but pain to both of us, let's just sign the divorce papers. He frowned and brushed the papers aside. Enough. Stop making a scene. Just apologize to Addison and let's move on. We'll still be good friends in the future. That single word, friends, coming from his mouth again, instantly dragged all those bitter memories back to the surface. I could no longer hold it in. My voice rose, sharp and trembling. Even if I stay single for the rest of my life, I will never be friends with someone who once bullied me. Apologize to her? Not in this lifetime. Back then, just to blend in with the others, I had hidden my family background, only to become the prime target of Addison's cruelty. On the very first day of school, my books and backpack had been thrown into the filthy pond behind the hill, and my uniform pants were slashed with a knife. Later, under pressure from my family, the school forced Addison to apologize publicly and was ready to expel her. It was Chase who persuaded me otherwise. Mirabelle, enemies should be resolved, not deepened. Since she knows she was wrong, just let her go. Because I was foolishly infatuated with him, I swallowed my pride, shook hands with Addison, and even helped her keep her place at school. Looking back now, his favoritism had started even then. I was just too blinded by love to see it. Addison's face turned even paler, and her tears began to fall like shattered beads, scattering across the floor. I was wrong. I crossed the line. I shouldn't have hoped we could be friends just because we were classmates. I forgot, I'm just a lowly employee in your company now. I deserve to die. I'll leave. Chase's eyes turned red in an instant. He pulled Addison behind him and snapped at me. I gave you the title of Mrs. Hudson, not so you could use it to bully others. Then he turned, gently patting Addison's trembling shoulder, his voice soft and comforting. Addison, don't belittle yourself. In my heart, you've never been just an ordinary employee. Gazing at the fragile woman before him, his eyes burned with emotion. You've always been the most special one to me. Watching my legal husband confess his feelings to another woman, I didn't lose control like I used to. I just felt disgusted, pure and bitter. With her degree from an unknown overseas university, Addison was never qualified to be Hudson Corporation's CEO assistant. But Chase insisted on keeping her, brushing off every objection. He not only gave her a sky-high salary unheard of in the industry, but also showed her a level of favoritism so outrageous, even I, his rightful wife, was pushed aside. She called him Mr. Hudson, yet always addressed me by my name. She claimed it was out of familiarity, but it was clear she simply didn't believe I was worthy of the title Mrs. Hudson, the CEO's wife. It would have been one thing if only she thought that way. But what surprised me was that Chase thought the same. I found it laughable. I, the eldest daughter of the Magnus family, had I ever needed the title Mrs. Hudson to assert myself? Once again, I regretted throwing away the proud, self-sufficient version of me for the sake of love. And with that, the last thread tying me to this marriage snapped clean. Chase, sign the divorce papers as soon as possible. Don't make me go through legal procedures. I dropped those words coldly, picked up my suitcase, and walked away without looking back. When I stepped into my house, my parents were cheerfully discussing the northern lights on a travel channel, but the moment they saw me, they turned off the TV in an instant. Traveling the world had always been their dream. Unfortunately, their only daughter had fallen hopelessly in love and thrown herself into a man, refusing to return home or take over the company. I stepped forward, took the remote control from the drawer, turned the TV back on, and quietly pulled out my phone to book 2 plane tickets to Finland. But instead of surprise or joy, they looked at me with nothing but quiet concern. I knew there was no use hiding it. I spoke plainly. He and I are getting a divorce. The spacious living room instantly fell into silence. After a long pause, they came to me and gently held my hands. No matter what decision you make, we'll support you as long as you're happy. Your mom and I will always be your backup. My eyes turned red in an instant, and the bitterness I had buried for so long spilled out with my tears. They had been against me marrying Chase back then, but they gave in, unable to resist my tearful begging. I gently held my father's hand, then reached for my mother's and stacked all 3 of our hands together. Forcing a smile, I said softly, "Don't worry, I'm doing fine." But they didn't look reassured at all. Instead, they insisted I postpone the flight for another week, so that we could spend a few more days together. Following their suggestion, I booked a family portrait session, something we used to cherish every year. When I first married Chase, I had invited him many times to join us, but he always dismissed it, claiming work came first. The next morning, my parents and I arrived at the photo studio. But just as we stepped in, an unexpected figure appeared before us, Chase. Standing beside him was Addison. She leaned sweetly on his shoulder, her voice tender. "Chase, thank you for canceling such an important meeting just to take pictures with me." Chase chuckled, lightly tapping her nose. "Silly girl, you're the one closest to me. If I don't spoil you, who else should I spoil?" A wave of bitterness burned at the back of my throat. So it turned out he hadn't been busy. He just never thought I was worth the time. "Mirabelle, what are you looking at?" "Nothing. Thought I saw someone I knew." I shifted slightly, shielding my mom's view, then gently pulled her away. Inside the studio, I held my dad's hand in one and my mom's arm in the other, smiling like a carefree child wrapped in the warmth of her world. The photographer captured that fleeting, tender moment, the 3 of us, together, as if frozen in time. Right then, I felt like I had been reborn, like I had finally reclaimed what mattered most in my life. Ouch! Just as my mom headed toward the restroom, my dad clutched his abdomen, his face tightening in pain. "What's wrong? Is it your stomach again?" I hurried to support him into the nearby lounge, my heart thudding as I called both our family doctor and emergency services. As I waited for the ambulance to arrive, Addison appeared, like a thorn in a rose garden. So this is why you're so eager to divorce Chase, because you've already found yourself a new sugar daddy. Her snobbish gaze swept over my father from head to toe, her voice dripping with malice. This old thing might look polished in a suit, but he's ancient. He's nothing compared to Chase. You really stooped low for money. How did you even manage to kiss him? My father had already pieced together who she was from her words. He realized she was the mistress who came between Chase and me. He tried to sit up to defend me, but the pain surged through him, forcing him back onto the sofa. Seeing his face contorted in agony, I rushed over and slapped her hard. Watch your filthy mouth, he's my father. A flicker of shock flashed across Addison's eyes, but it quickly twisted into scorn. If your background were really that impressive, would I have gotten away with bullying you back then? All it took was a fake apology. Mirabelle, admit it. Without Chase, you're nothing. Chase had helped her back then, but never told her the truth. He even kept my family background hidden. He didn't realize that his sweet attempt to preserve his first love's pride would be the very reason she was digging her own grave today. Addison still hadn't noticed anything was off. Her calculating eyes gleamed with arrogance. Good thing you had the sense to leave early, so I could be with Chase. You're only good enough to waste away beside that wrinkled old man. Ha ha. But before her laughter could settle, her face suddenly twisted in horror as she screamed. Ah! Let go of me. Addison, you're the one who's begging for death. Eyes bloodshot, I grabbed the back of her collar and yanked her out. But before I could drag her further, a hand shoved between us, ripping her from my grasp. Mirabelle, what insane dog fit are you throwing again? You just never change. Chase shouted, eyes burning with disgust. I had tolerated his bias before, but even now, when my father's life hung by a thread, he was still siding with her. I shouted at him, my whole body trembling. Do you even know what your precious lover just did? She nearly killed my dad. Only then did his eyes flick toward the living room and notice my father lying unconscious on the sofa. The family doctor was already there, performing emergency treatment. At the same time, my mother sat crumpled beside him, clutching his hand and weeping softly. A flicker of guilt passed through Chase's stunned expression. Seizing the moment, Addison wiped her tears and clung to his sleeve. Chase, it hurt so much. Please help me. The guilt in his eyes vanished in an instant. Isn't your father still alive? Did you really have to go that far on Addison? Look at her. She's scared out of her mind. He wrapped the trembling woman in his arms, glaring at me as if I were the one who'd done wrong. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. Yeah, my father was hanging on by a thread, but poor Addison was pale with fright. At that moment, something inside me shattered completely. Chase, open your damn eyes and see what going too far really looks like. I lunged forward, grabbed Addison's hair, and slammed her hard to the floor. This is for your filthy mouth, your poison. And this is for crossing the line again and again, for hurting my family. The brutal sound of impact echoed, and a patch of crimson slowly spread across the white floor. Chase rushed to pull me away, but to his disbelief at 6'1", he couldn't overpower me at 5'3". Back then, just because Chase couldn't handle anything difficult, I softened myself and pretended to be someone easy to love. Provoked like this today, the wild instinct buried deep inside me snapped awake, more untamed than ever. Chase glared at me, his eyes dark and burning. Let go. In your dreams, I shot back, my grip tightening. Unable to shake me off, he started prying my fingers apart one by one. The sound of cracking bones echoed in the air. Pain shot through me, but I bit down hard and refused to release my hold. Chase ignored the agony on my face, relentless as he forced my hand open little by little. He growled, "Let go now, or there'll be no going back between us." A bitter sneer curved my lips. He still thought I'd come crawling back, begging for reconciliation. At first, I had still considered parting on good terms, for the sake of the years we had shared. But now there was nothing left, only a fight to the death. Behind me, my dad suddenly opened his eyes, looked toward me, and coughed up a mouthful of blood with a cry. "Dad!" I screamed, as every drop of blood in my body turned to ice. "Chase, you've officially crossed the line with me. If I don't destroy you and that vile woman, I'm not a Magnus." Gritting my teeth, I gathered every ounce of strength and yanked Addison's hair. She stared wide-eyed at the clump of scalp and hair in my hand, let out a piercing scream, and collapsed on the spot. Chase was knocked to the ground by the force. Without hesitation, I rushed after my father's emergency stretcher and pushed it at full speed as we fled. The smell of the municipal hospital's emergency wing was exactly as I remembered it from my youth, a cloying mixture of industrial pine cleaner, sour vegetable broth and the faint, dry sting of rubbing alcohol. The gurney wheels screeched against the wet linoleum of the corridor as the paramedics pushed my father toward the red double doors of Trauma Room 1. Vascular line. Now, the lead doctor roared, his hand pressing a clean white pad against my father's lips where another dark, thick trail of blood was beginning to pool. His pressure is dropping. 70/40. Prepare to. Units of matched packed red cells. Mirabelle. Mirabelle, wait. A heavy, running step clicked rapidly against the concrete floor behind me. I turned around slowly, my left hand, the one with the 3 fractured fingers. Chase had pried apart, resting awkwardly inside my coat pocket. The skin was already turning a deep sallow purple, the swelling stretching the flesh until my knuckles looked like bruised plums. Chase was standing by the reception desk. He had taken off his suit jacket, his white linen shirt wrinkled and stained with my father's blood near the cuff. Beside him stood his personal assistant, Clara, who was clutching a pile of corporate folders with a look of profound, terrified confusion. Mirabelle, let's talk, Chase said, his voice carrying that same quiet, reasonable register he used when he was explaining a difficult business decision to his board. The scene in the photo studio. It was a misunderstanding. Addison didn't know he was your father. If you had just told us. If I had just told you, I repeated, my voice flat, devoid of the shaking anger that had characterized our fight in the studio, you would have treated my father with the same fawning respect you show your business partners. But, because you thought he was a nobody, you allowed your mistress to call him an ancient sugar daddy while he was vomiting blood on the floor. She's not my mistress, Chase hissed, his jaw setting in that hard, rigid line of his. I've explained this 1,000 times. I kept her as an assistant out of responsibility. The responsibility is over, Chase, I said, my voice dropping into a register that made the entire hospital corridor go dead silent. I pulled my left hand from my pocket, the black medical brace, which the triage nurse had just wrapped around my 3 broken fingers, stood out in stark, ugly contrast against the white sleeve of my coat. The 3 broken fingers, I said, pointing to the brace, and the blood on the floor. My father's lawyers will be filing the criminal charges for domestic battery and corporate conspiracy by Monday morning. The Magnus Group is officially withdrawing all credit lines from the Hudson Corporation. Chase's face went a sallow, sickly gray beneath his tan. The Magnus Group? What? What do they have to do with this? My father is Thomas Magnus, I said, turning on my heel toward the ICU doors. The majority shareholder of the very bank that holds your company's commercial loans. We'll settle the rest in court. The corporate headquarters of the Hudson Corporation was located in the high-rise financial district of the capital, a 70-story tower of blue glass and steel. But on Monday morning, the atmosphere in the executive suite was suffocating. The 6 directors, men who had been Chase's father's associates, were sitting in silence, their eyes fixed on the financial terminals in front of them. Chase sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his tie slightly loose, his face sallow and tired from 48 hours of sleeplessness and endless meetings with the bank's risk management team. It's a temporary delay, Chase said, his voice rising, trying to regain control of the room. The Magnus Group is just trying to pressure us because of a personal dispute. Once the merger with the Northern District Development Project is finalized next week, our valuation will double. We won't need their credit line. And who is going to finalize the Northern District project, Chase? The door to the boardroom opened. My father's personal attorney, Marcus, walked in, followed by 2 municipal court bailiffs. He didn't look at Chase. His eyes were fixed on the silver tray in his hand, which carried a single, white leather folder. Mr. Hudson, Marcus said, his voice flat but carrying the unyielding force of a hammer blow. The Magnus Group has officially initiated a quiet withdrawal of their personal capital. We've lost 40% of our short-term liquidity in 48 hours. He laid the documents in front of each board member. We are introducing a motion to suspend Chase Hudson from his position as CEO, pending a full forensic audit of the corporate accounts, Marcus said. Under the terms of our original joint venture, any misrepresentation of primary lineage or corporate theft constitutes a material breach of trust, subjecting the current managing partners to immediate forfeiture of all corporate holdings. No, Addison Rodrigo screamed, running into the boardroom from the visitor gallery, her silk handkerchief tearing in her grip. Chase, you can't do this. We worked so hard for this project. Mirabelle is just trying to frame us because she's jealous of our relationship. Marcus didn't look at her. He turned his gaze to the chief of the county police, details standing behind him. Officer Miller, please execute the warrant. The handcuffs clicked shut around Addison's wrists with a cold, metallic ring. Addison Rodrigo, the officer said, his voice flat as cement. You are under arrest for corporate embezzlement, faking academic credentials, and the theft of Magnus Group trade secrets. You have the right to remain silent. Addison's face did not just go pale. It seemed to disintegrate. Her high-fashion silk dress looked wrinkled and stained, and she looked at Chase with a desperate, wild pleading. Chase, help me. You promised you'd protect me. You said you'd always be my rock. But Chase didn't move. He sat at the head of the table, his head bowed, his hands shaking as he stared at the document in front of him. The golden boy of the Hudson family had finally run out of plays. The corporate headquarters of the Magnus Group was located in the capital's oldest, most prestigious district, a sprawling Gothic building made of gray river stone and heavy oak doors. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the grand boardroom, my left hand resting on the polished wood, the black medical brace looking stark and serious against my cream silk blouse. My father sat beside me, his skin still slightly pale from the abdominal surgery, but his eyes were bright, clear, and carrying that same quiet, absolute authority that had made him the patriarch of our family. The contracts with the Northern District have been finalized, Mirabelle, my father said, his voice quiet. And the Hudson Corporation? The bankruptcy court has already authorized the seizure of their warehouse leases. Chase has 48 hours to clear his things from the company offices. I know, Dad, I said, my fingers slowly tracing the smooth white paper of the contract. The door to the boardroom opened. Chase walked in. He wasn't wearing his tailored suit or his expensive leather shoes today. He wore a cheap, off-the-rack gray coat, his hair unwashed, his face gray and hollowed out by a week of sleeplessness. Mirabelle, he said, his voice a dry, rattling whisper as he stopped 10 feet from where I sat. We need to talk. Just 5 minutes. Please. This is a corporate board meeting, Mr. Hudson, I said, my voice carrying the flat, level rhythm of a dry laboratory report. If you have a business proposal, you should submit it to our legal department. I don't have a proposal, Mirabelle, he cried out, his voice cracking with a raw, desperate panic. I came to apologize. The photo studio. Addison. I didn't know she was the one who bullied you in high school. I thought she was just a fragile, hard-working girl. He took a step closer, his hands reaching out toward me, his fingers trembling. I've already fired her, Mirabelle. I've signed the separation papers. I'll give you the LA house, I'll give you the cars, I'll give you everything I have. Just, please don't leave me in this silence. I looked down at the black medical brace on my left hand. I remembered the 5 years we had spent together. I remembered how I had working frantically, grueling overtime to finish his projects, while he was at a hotel room with his first love, telling his mother that my childish tantrums were exhausting him. I cannot help you, Chase, I said softly, my voice as quiet as the winter wind through the concrete yard. Because to forgive you, I would first have to care about what I lost. And right now, my parents are waiting for me at the airport. We're going to Finland. I stood up, picked up my leather bag, and walked past him toward the exit. Mirabelle. Wait, he screamed, his hands reaching out to grab my coat sleeve, but our family's security guards immediately stepped forward, their hands resting on their holsters, stopping him instantly. The flight is at 5, Mr. Hudson, my father said, his voice like cold stone, as he stood up from the table. And my daughter, she has a world to see. I pushed the heavy double doors of the boardroom open, turned the lock, and walked out into the bright, clean winter sun of the avenue, leaving the CEO of the Hudson Corporation to collapse in his grand, empty room behind me. The northern lights in Finland were beautiful, turning the cold, dark sky of the Arctic Circle into a vast, swirling curtain of green and violet light. I sat on the wooden deck of our private log cabin, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my left hand free of the black medical brace. The 3 tiny pale scars on my fingers were invisible under the light, but they felt like a beautiful, clean medal of my own survival. My father sat beside me in his wheelchair, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, his face warm and peaceful under the stars. The wind is picking up, Mirabelle, my mom said, walking out of the cabin with a fresh batch of warm gingerbread. Are you cold? No, Mom, I said, leaning my head against her shoulder, my fingers closing around the warm ceramic of my teacup. I'm very warm. Across the snow-covered fields, the first yellow lights of the village were starting to glow in the dark, but I didn't look at them. I closed my eyes, took a sip of my warm tea, and let the clean, cold wind of the north carry the last dry leaves of the past away into the endlessly beautiful horizon ahead.